you got thousands of letters from women you've inspired. I have one here from 8-year-old Abigail Kraus in Solvang, California. I'd like to read it to you.
But after you got picked to be on Apollo 15, my dad bought me a model of my own. I named the command module Cobb.
Hey guys, welcome to Balloon Hit Productions for another video. I'm your master of ceremonies. My name is Marcelo Nostroza, and I'd like to welcome you back to my review series For All Mankind, Season 1. Today I'll be talking about Episode 5 entitled Into the Abyss. But as usual, I will not be alone for this discussion. I would like to welcome back my co-pilot, my good friend for anything space, Dan Decker. Welcome back.
Yeah. Hey, good to see you again.
Good to see you too. So as usual, do you want to do our rundown? Do you want to do our summary for this episode before we start in earnest?
Absolutely. So, if you are just joining us as a show, you should go back and watch the other 4 episodes and get caught up, because this is we're discussing For All Mankind Season 1, which is an alt history timeline of the space race against the Soviets and the United States, wherein the Soviets beat us to the moon. This particular episode, Into the Abyss, follows up after last week, where we launched Apollo 15, carrying the first American woman astronaut into space, and not just into space, but straight to the moon, Molly Cobb. And this episode covers them getting the information from last episode that there might be water ice on the moon, and they are only supposed to survey to confirm. But man, the Soviets may also be that much closer. So Ed and crew, they decide to call the ball. They're going to land on the moon. They're going to go search for ice. Well, they're going to land on the moon anyway, but they're going to go land on the moon where it's closer that they can go search for ice. And so they come up with a plan. We're going to get into the discussion about the plan and what happens. But yeah, that sets this up. I feel like this one kind of kicks off a lot of the action side of the series.
It does, because you know what, for a show about space exploration, until this episode, we haven't really gotten that.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, here we go. We're actually on the goddamn moon. Here we go.
It's time. Going forward, we spend, I think, a lot more time as the series goes on in space. But yeah, this is like the literally the launching off pad.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the thing that I really, really, really enjoyed about this episode is, in this episode, a part of it focuses on how the people on Earth react to everything that's happening on the moon. In particular, I'm talking about the emotional toll that these spouses of these astronauts take. In particular, I want to talk about Wayne's sort of feelings about his wife being on the moon and what that does to him. And I really like that, because they could have just written this episode with supportive spouses and not talking about their emotions and not really delving into what pressures the people at home have to face because their loved ones or their wives or their husbands are on the moon. And I thought that the writers really picked a unique way of doing that, telling us how people react to having their loved ones in space through Wayne. So, first off, what did you think about that choice by the writers?
Well, first of all, I love Wayne as a character and as a proxy for those of us with all of that who would have that uncertainty. But he is the contrast to, like you said, the stoicness that traditional astronaut spouses, up until this point, wives, have had to put on the brave face. And so Wayne, being of the opposite sex, the coin being flipped, the table being turned, it's expected as a masculine person, he's going to put on the brave face. He doesn't have to put on a brave face, right? And they dive into some really interesting psychology about how Wayne handles Molly being on the moon versus how Karen handles Ed being on the moon, right? Or away on mission. And presumably Karen's dealt with the idea of, on mission more than Wayne has, because she's dealt with, Ed through war and being missing in action, things like that, or concerned about that. But the contrast between, and this is a little out of order timeline wise in the episode, but the contrast between how Wayne processes that through essentially a nightmare, and how he processes that out, versus Karen's insistence that she just doesn't dream, right? But yeah, I think Wayne represents how a reasonable person would feel when someone they love is 250,000 miles away in the vacuum of space on a rock. It'd be a little concerning. So, yeah, in the scheme of things, I feel like Wayne has a perfectly reasonable reaction to his wife being on the moon, whereas Karen is trying to pretend like it doesn't bother her.
Yeah, Karen doesn't seem like an individual that doesn't let her feelings in. And as a result of that, there's this really, really poignant moment when all the astronaut wives are together watching the updates from the moon mission at Karen's house. And Wayne is sort of isolated from the group. He's on the porch, and Karen comes out to him and offers him some corn. And that's when Wayne tells Karen about the dream that he had. And you could tell that from the moment that Wayne starts speaking, Karen just tightens up, and she just gets so uncomfortable to the moment when she actually walks away from Wayne, and Wayne says, "No, no, no, no. If I can't tell you about this, who am I going to tell?"
Right. There's
And
literally no one else in his
yeah,
life who can conceivably understand.
yeah. And he just says, I reach a point in the dream, and then I find Molly's head decapitated on the moon, and then Karen loses it. She walks away.
Right.
So I think that Wayne opening up to Karen really reintroduced her fears about Ed being in space, and sort of brought her feelings dormant, the ones that she had stuffed down below, the ones that she pretended don't exist, and Wayne's sort of panic, nervous, fever dream brought that to the surface, and made her realize that she has to deal with them, and she has to let them go,
Right.
because keeping that in your head and pretending everything is fine is not good,
No.
because you can only take so much before you fucking explode.
She had already built coping mechanisms, right? And Wayne tore those down unceremoniously, and reminded her, because to her, or to the astronaut wives, you don't talk about it, right? And we got some of that in the earlier episode, or earlier on in the season, when Deke's wife was there, and she was kind of the one in charge on all that, whatever that situation was. But they're not. They don't. It's, oh, we just don't talk about it, because if you don't talk about it, nothing bad will happen, kind of thing. And Wayne is, understandably distressed about the whole thing. But yeah, Karen has he and this is where, this is the beginning of their relationship that pays off in great ways down the road. But it is this kinship that they build now, and it starts right here, because he forces her to reconsider some things that I think, from his perspective.
Our astronauts are hovering over the moon, and they discover that they kind of overshot their landing area, if I'm not mistaken. So mission control is discussing whether or not to keep going forward with the mission or to abort because they overshot their landing. And because they overshot their landing, they would have to land in an area that they didn't survey, and everything would go to shit. So I really like that to a point. NASA's discussing this on the ground, but in space, you have our crew, you have Ed, you have Molly, and you have the other gentleman. And it gets to a point where Ed turns off the comms and it goes, guys, listen, we did not come all this way to turn tail and go home without nothing. This is bullshit. We need to make a decision now if we're going to do this or if we're going to go back. And I love the fact that Ed puts the onus on Molly. He says what he says what he needs to say. The other guy does too. And then Ed goes, okay, Molly, what do you think? Should we do this or not? And Molly's the one that says, okay, let's go for let's go for an alternate landing site. But also, while this is going on Earth at Mission Control, Mr. Powers, our favorite, politician, right, says, we have to do this. If we don't do this now, by the time we get back up there on 16, the Russians will beat us again, and that's not what we want. So I understand how dangerous this is, but we need to fucking do this now. So look, the astronauts who are over the surface of the moon right now, and NASA sort of understands that if they don't do this, they can't wait till 16, because if they will till 16, they're fucked, and the president's going to be pissed.
Right.
So what do you think about that whole sequence, both with our astronauts hovering over the moon and down here at NASA?
Well, so this goes back to, Ed inadvertently calling NASA to the carpet about, not being willing to take the chance, having lost their courage and playing it safe, from earlier in the season. And what we're having here is they had surveyed a good landing site, and it became the discussion of, okay, are we going to intentionally miss that and land near the crater to do the water thing? And it becomes, so yeah, like you said, they're having that talk on the ship because they want to be the heroes, right? And they're like, oh yeah, we can do this. There's our director of NASA saying we have to do this because if we don't, the Russians are going to win. And then you've got all of the people running numbers in Mission Control whose job it is to keep everyone safe, but ultimately they have no say. And this has been proven before, or played out before in the show. It's up to, what are they going to do? They're 250,000 miles away. If they want to land the ship, they're going to land the ship. they're going to land wherever they decide they're going to land, whether or not that's the mission, because they're the ones there. And that's what Ed's point becomes. We're on mission. We're in command of this spacecraft. We're in the command of this, and they come to a consensus as a crew that that's what they want to do, and falls back to Mission Control, where they say, well, it's his ship, his command, and that's what they're going to do. And they, as they say, I think a couple of times in the episode, they roll the hard 6, and it comes out in their favor. But it is for some, and he puts it, like you say, he puts it on Molly, who he calls her out for, having not really put on a good show in The Sims, and now it's time. Are you good at this or are you not? And they nailed it.
Yeah, listen, but you make a really, really good point. With all the politics and with all the muster and with all the really, second guessing on Earth, NASA, and in Washington to the validity of the space program, once the astronauts are up there and they're hovering the moon, nobody can stop them. It doesn't matter what the president says 50,000 miles away, because it doesn't matter. The astronauts are the ones out there, and if they fuck up, they're dead. All the people on Earth are going to be fine. So I really like that onus that NASA understood that it's their call, and I like the onus that Ed and Molly and the other guy decided, okay, we need to go broke. We need to go for broke right now, because if we don't do this, the whole future of the program is at risk. We need to find water or we're fucked.
Right.
So I really like that onus. The other thing, if I could just take us back for a tiny minute now, at the start of the episode, it starts with a very, very poignant, emotional moment. Deke is actually the astronauts are being broadcast on TV,
Mm-hmm.
and Deke reads a letter from a little girl written to Molly about how Molly made it okay for her to play with astronaut toys.
Yep.
Now I don't know if that's the genius of the writer of this episode, but those letters sounded pretty real to me.
Oh yeah, yeah. And as you know, as Star Trek fans, you and I are well aware of the lore that Nichelle Nichols through Uhura inspired generations of women astronauts and scientists and so on. And so the spirit of those letters obviously is true, but they rang. Somebody felt that in their heart when they wrote that, because it feels like something that a real child would have written to a hero along those lines. And what I love about it, though, is it plays directly. You know, it's just this. It's the same thread from the previous episode where Margot called Molly out and told her, "No, you're not just some pilot. You're an astronaut, and it matters." And here's a little bit of that payoff, and Molly gets it, and follows on with saying, "Well, I'll try not to disappoint you." And then I think cusses on live TV.
Yes, he does. He does.
So because I mean, that's just Molly. That's one of my favorites, but that's just Molly.
Yeah, that's just Molly. I mean, after a really, really poignant moment with Molly being read those letters by Deke on national television, we cut back to Shane and Karen in the house. And God bless him. He's like 5 years. I think he's 5 years old. God bless Shane. And you guys will understand that as we keep going
Bless Shane.
forward here. He goes, why is it all about her? Dad's commanding the mission.
Yeah, right.
and Karen, God bless her heart, she goes, just eat your cereal.
Yeah, right. Yeah, she doesn't want to talk about it either. And the way Karen comes around in this show is just excellent character development. But she starts off, it's hard to love her.
Yeah, but you know what? It takes a long time, though.
Yeah.
And I don't think Karen starts to really turn until she has to go through something horrific, which we're going to get to, but not this. We're going to get to it. But I think that event, which I'm not going to spoil if you haven't seen the show before, and if you're watching along with us for the first time ever, I'd like to say thank you. I think that event really changed a course in her life and really made her understand that she needs to be better and she needs to be stronger. So I think that event made her realize that she wanted something more out of her life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where, that growth will come. But in this episode, that she's just like, no, it should be all about your dad. Just eat your cereal.
Yeah, just eat your cereal. The other thing that I was really pleased about with this episode, in last episode we got teased that Danielle's husband was coming home by the name of Clayton, and he served in Vietnam. And in this episode, we finally meet him for the first time. So we meet Clay for the first time in person. He comes back from Vietnam. There are like two massive scenes in the outpost with Clay, Danielle, and God bless his heart, I want to hit him, Gordo. So just real quick, just talk about those two scenes in like a massive bunch.
Yeah. So, like you're saying, we finally get to meet Clay. As we saw in the clip, Danielle comes to pick him up, and as they're leaving, he stops at the post gate.
Yep.
And he throws his ribbons at him at the garden and leaves. I guess he doesn't intend to ever dress out again. And so they, like I said, they go to the outpost. They meet up with Gordo because uh, Danielle and him are assigned to was it 17 or 20, an upcoming Apollo mission.
I think it's 17.
Yeah, and they're going to be on the same ship together. So she wants Gordo and Clay to meet. Um, there's a lot of tension there because as it comes out, Gordo just so happened to miss service in Korea and then became an astronaut instead of having to go to Vietnam. And so while he has been in the military, he didn't actually see any action. And we have Clay just coming back from Vietnam, and getting a little bit of grief from Gordo for not wearing his stuff, and it results in a kind of a heated moment. Gordo steps way out of line with the things that he says, but as is shown, pretty good. They've all had, I mean, maybe a glass of champagne, and he's had the rest. So Gordo and they're not even really talking about that, but they're
No.
using that to build up to where he goes. They're showing his alcoholic tendency and what a problem it can be, and so Danielle caught in a pickle there, because both people were heated, but Gordo definitely out of line over Clay. And so she has to send Clay out, and then says to Gordo, you couldn't even give him a day without having to bring this stuff up. He just got home, it definitely set a tense mood. And the dynamic between Danielle and Gordo later, this kind of always putting herself behind these other astronauts. This kind of starts that, I think, that tale right there. But yeah, it kind of also encapsulates the different lives that Danielle and Clay were leading, but also having been married, presumably trying to lead that life together, but having a completely different experience, and trying to reintegrate that is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, listen, I for one, I don't know. Not that I don't know, I do know, but I'm with you. I think, and I'm with you, and I'm with Danielle as well. I think Gordo was just out of line, and that was completely unnecessary. He didn't have to give someone who just came back from Korea grief for not wearing his colors. First of all, Gordo is an astronaut.
Right.
He's not. Astronauts are not soldiers, and and believe me, that comes apparent later on in the series,
Yeah.
when something else happens on the moon. But I think for someone like Gordo to dress down somebody who just came from Korea is completely improper. And I think the only reason that Gordo did that is because he was half in the back.
Yep.
Like like Dan intimated. And I just think that is a precursor to sort of set up the tension in between Gordo and Danielle. But you just mentioned Danielle sort of for the early stage of her career, Danielle sort of behind like the most prominent astronauts in the program,
Mm-hmm.
behind Ed, behind Gordo, and all of that. But really, Danielle does something in this season. I believe it's the next episode that that really tells you all you need to know about Danielle,
Mm-hmm.
and really tells you that, and really tells you everything that you need to know about how she feels about her fellow astronauts, because she didn't have to do what she did,
Nope.
but she's going to do it anyway.
Yep.
And the guy that she does it for is the guy that she just fought with in this episode.
Yep.
So I really like that organic setup by the writers. In first watch, I kind of didn't care for Clay, but I did appreciate what the writers were trying to say with him. But I do feel that the way that they went with the story was kind of sad.
Yeah.
because Danielle was accomplishing these wonderful things, but Clay had his own stuff going on, and because he had his own stuff going on, he couldn't really understand the full weight of it, and
Yeah.
he couldn't really enjoy it with Danielle because he had just come back from a situation that he didn't want to be in.
Right.
He signed up, and what he signed up for is something that he just wasn't ready for, and that ultimately changed him as a individual. I so so uh I am incredibly apologetic for what happens to Clay. Karen goes back to Wayne's house to sort of apologize for freaking out on him at the party.
So the lead up to that too, though,
Yeah,
from the party,
yeah,
as Wayne leaves, and she's out there
that's great.
talking to Tracy, and she says something about it, and then she's like, and he smells funny, and Tracy's like, it's because he's smoking weed. you know it's just because and it just kind of speaks to some level of Karen's, still has some level of innocence, which I think is pretty funny. But yeah, she goes to visit Wayne, who is surprised but welcoming, as you might imagine Wayne would be surprised for her to show up. But again, this kind of like, she I think she probably spent time pondering what he said about, if I can't talk to you about these things, who can I talk to about them? And I gather from the way she's come to him that she realizes the converse is true. She doesn't have anyone that she can talk to, and Wayne makes it safe, you know,
Right.
somehow. But yeah, what a great interaction they have here, and she comes clean with the dreams that she's had.
Yeah, I know, but the way that the writers set up that scene is specific because Karen comes off as going to Wayne to sort of judge him for the way that he acted at the party, and I love how Wayne sort of puts the shoe on the other foot and defends himself and says, you can't judge me for that. How dare you come to my house and judge me for the way that I feel about my wife?
Right.
You
Right.
don't you don't have any right to do that. And I also like how after she understood that and after she saw how vulnerable Wayne was when he fell apart, it's just great. And I love the story that she gives about being a woman in a clearing and then coming to an end of the clearing and then seeing this lion with these white beady black eyes and then discovering that this lion was eating Ed alive from the inside out.
Karen has had and has been in a different kind of danger before, right? So the fact that her fears are expressed through the ferocity of this animal, it's because, from her perspective at the time, was being, predated upon by an enemy, where, Wayne's expression of fear and his nightmare is 100% through being out of control of the situation, right? And so the way those two very similar emotions, on the surface, are expressed differently through the two different psyches of our characters, is because in the end, they are, that's what binds them. That fear is what connects them, but the way they experience it completely different due to, their, when they were brought into that feeling. Like, as I said, Karen's comes from the fear of losing Ed through war, and all Wayne has is Molly's experience in space.
Right, right, right. No, I don't- no, I know, and and like you mentioned earlier on, it's really nice that the writers set them up in this way because at first you would assume in this episode that these people aren't going to like each other and they're going to be adversaries for the whole time because Karen sort of views Wayne as in a sort of she kind of views herself as above Wayne a little bit when she first meets him.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
But once she gets to know him and once she gets to really understand what he's going through, she can level with him in that way because again, like I said, and like Dana said earlier in this episode, Karen just bottles her feelings down deep and she doesn't deal with them.
Because if she doesn't, and they, most of the time Ed's been gone, so if she lets her
Right.
feelings come out, then it's the kids that have to bear the brunt
Deal
of
with
that.
it.
It's Shane that has to,
Right.
yeah. So she's had to, whereas Wayne doesn't have anybody to be brave for when Molly's not around. You know,
Right.
Molly's
You know,
Molly's there to be brave for Wayne.
yeah, no, I listen, I'm so glad that you said that last part because that sort of leads me into talking about the next scene that I feel is connected to that in some way. So Ed and Molly are in the are in the limb. They're in hammocks, cool hammocks. And
Sandbags.
Ed, yeah, cool hammocks. Ed is having sort of like a reflective moment because Molly's like, Ed, are you sleeping? And Ed's like, no. And then Ed talks about how he is not such a great father. And Molly also mentions that, you know, I never wanted kids because they seem like too much work. And I think that this is very poignant. Ed goes on this big diatribe about how he couldn't get Shane to learn how to ride a bike properly
Yep.
and how every time he fell off and how several times when he fell off, he would give him excuses for not wanting to get back on and not wanting to try it again.
Mhm.
And Ed talks about how angry he got and how disappointed he got with Shane. And he mentions this one moment where Shane just looks at him and looks at him with a face of like, oh my God, I must be broken. I can't ride a bike.
Yeah.
And Ed goes, for the life of me, I'll never forget that look that he gave me. Like, I'll never forget it. And then he goes, what's wrong with me? What is it? And then Molly goes, well, you're a selfish prick. We're both selfish pricks.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh,
And then she goes, well, you know what? I saw that Wayne was not comfortable with me going to the moon. I saw that he wasn't comfortable, but I, le- I chose to let him panic about it.
yep.
She doesn't say that she did that because she felt nervous, and if Wayne was nervous, she didn't have to think about it. But I thought that that was very, very interesting because in this scene, you discover that Molly and Ed are more alike than they initially thought. So, what do you think about the whole great sort of introspective
So
scene with Ed and Molly in the limb?
she was connecting the dots for Ed that she chose to let Wayne sit in fear, and they both are actually selfish pricks because that's what it takes to end up on the moon. And she has to come to that realization too. Like, I think you kind of watch her thought process as she's kind of trying to agree with that, and then realizes that, hey, no, wait, I'm also a selfish prick, and then we're just a couple of selfish prick sardines in the sardine can on the moon.
Mhm.
But yeah, because that is what it takes. I mean, you think about it. You have to be willing to let the people you love essentially suffer, and it isn't that because being honest, like I can't imagine that there's anyone who loves someone that could let them leave the planet and not be uh, scared about it. Like, it doesn't even have to be someone like your spouse or your direct loved one. Like, heck, any one of my friends could go into space and I'd be super worried about whether or not they were going to come back.
Yeah.
So but it does take
I
someone
mean,
who can kind of set aside their empathy for the people they love and take the ride.
the next thing that I want to talk about is a really, really, really fucking funny scene. So Ed and Molly are surveying the moon for different spots to where there could be water, and they can't find jack shit.
Nope.
Right there, they're not finding jack shit, and they're running out of time. So, so I think it's Molly or Ed or one of them. They come across the giant crater. They're like, we got one more chance, and if we don't find water, we're all fucked. So
Mhm.
why doesn't one of us go down this giant crater
Oh, it's huge.
that is as big as the Grand Canyon and see what we find down there?
It is it's a harebrained scheme to say the least.
Yeah,
But
it's so dumb.
and to be well, and it goes back to earlier where what are they going to do? They're on the moon. If this is how they want to play it, they're going to play it. They're not going to be well. They're not going to be any more reckless than they need to be.
Yeah.
But man, they go down. They do some cowboy stuff.
Yeah, and the way
Literally.
listen, and the way that they figure out how to go down there is like the most asinine thing ever. They look at the lunar lander car thing that they got.
Yeah, the rover.
The rover, thank you,
Yeah,
Dan.
yeah.
They look at the rover and they see that the rover has a winch. And that winch has cable.
Yeah.
So Molly, God bless her heart, goes, why don't we just use that?
Yep.
And Ed goes, I love this though. As they're discussing this, Ed, being the practical one, says, I should go down. And Molly's like, well, that's a problem because number one, the rover is only, it can only take so much weight. And number two, you're heavy as shit. She doesn't say that,
Nope.
but she intimates that. She goes, why don't I go down? I weigh at least half the amount that you do. I could do it.
Even on the moon, yeah, still way less.
Yeah, even on the moon. So Ed, against his better judgment, or he agrees to it. So Molly hooks herself up to the cable on the rover, and she goes down into the
Down.
crevice.
Yep.
That scene is so well done.
All of it, all of the tension and the way this show, at least in
It's
this,
space, yeah.
especially, is the way they make the tension is
Yeah.
is the fact that you have these incredibly capable people in these incredibly incapable circumstances, right?
Mhm.
You know, any given day on Earth, these two trying to do this, success, no big deal. But here we are, and some of the details that come out just in dialogue about that add to how awful this is. Like you mentioned, it's deeper than the Grand Canyon by a lot.
But yeah.
By a lot. And they essentially wreck their car, and they're going to have to foot it back from the crater. But instead of driving the car, because they turned the axle into a winch, and so instead of being able to and carry back the stuff they get, so they not only they got to find what they're looking for in a place they weren't supposed to go looking for it, do that, get back, then walk instead of drive because they broke their car on purpose to get the thing that they need. And in all of that, manage the fact that they have a limited amount of O2, are going to be doing more work as a result of the choices they have made, which by nature consumes more of their oxygen than they have prepared for. So that all builds this tension. And then they come to the conclusion, they understand, well, there may be water here, but they're not deep enough to get to it because any water that's there is going to have been exposed to the sun, evaporated, etc. So they got to get to where the light hasn't been. And they're like, oh yeah, the light hasn't been there for 4 billion years. What?
What? There's no light down here.
What? That doesn't sound scary at all. What lives in 4 billion year old darkness? I don't know. Let's go find out, says Molly. So, in a jury rigged winch on a car on the moon that was built by the lowest bidder.
Oh shit.
With Ed. But to your point, and this again, this is just storytelling done well. Ed insisting at first to be the one to go is because he's the leader. He's the mission commander. He puts, it falls into that leader space of you don't ask someone to do something you wouldn't do first yourself. And given the choice between the two of them, Ed's going to be the one to want to go first because that's the mission. That's his job. He's got to protect Molly as his under his command, et cetera, and so on. But also, as a good leader will, listens to the people who've been hired to be the experts with them. And Molly just practically says, hey, look, no, we got to get this done. And if you do it, we're going to fail because you weigh too much, fat ass.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, Ed's a smart man. He's a smart person. He knows that, he doesn't let his, and this kind of counters the conversation they had in the hammocks about the ego. They're not letting their egos, either one of them, let their egos take over the moment here to be the selfish prick that wins. They understand that the stakes are bigger than the two of them, which is why they're willing to put in the work and the risk to get it done. And man, boy, doesn't it the storytelling, the way they shoot, the way it's shot, the tension they build. The fact that Molly, they take it right up to the line. It's got that very much that test pilot mentality of like, I'm not bingo on fuel yet. By God, we're going to keep going. And just so good, so good.
Yeah, listen, I think I cannot believe we haven't brought this up, but really we haven't had the opportunity to, because like we said in the opening, this is the really first time that we're actually in the shit.
Yeah.
In the mud. The way that the For All Mankind production team depicts space, I think, is the best depiction of space ever, because it is so accurate to what space would actually be like. Because look, you and I have seen a billion space stings throughout the course of our lives.
Yep.
And inevitably we're like, that's cool, but space doesn't work like that.
Right.
What's your overall thoughts on the way that the For All Man team has chosen to actually depict how space actually works?
Well, I know, first of all, that to get it close to even believable is a lot of work, because especially, I think low gravity might be harder than no gravity to do special effects wise, because more wire work, things like that. But one of the things that did stand out to me that kind of a peek behind the curtain, as it were, and I think it's in this episode where they show Molly floating in zero G and her hair's out, but it's so obvious. It's like stiff from hairspray or something. It just looks like it's just like teased up and stuck up. It doesn't look like actual hair floating in space, and that kind of tickled me. But no, the way they get the effect of space right, the way things would behave, the low to no sound effects when we're outside the vehicles, just very much like like they did with Battlestar Galactica, the remake, where everything was more somewhat physically accurate as far as like how reverb and sound and would or wouldn't work inside of or outside of a spacecraft. So the attention to detail to get the science as close to right as they can until we just have to diverge from science.
Yeah, I mean, look, just a small side here. The Vipers in Battlestar Galactica, the sound that the Vipers make is like the coolest thing ever, because
it is.
Sounds cool.
It's a very good sound effect.
It just sounds fucking cool, right?
Yep. And it's what your brain connects with it in a way you're like, yeah, that's what it would sound like.
Yeah. So, you just mentioned it before as we come to almost to the end of this episode. So Molly is trudging down this massive canyon. Wayne is freaking out watching it on TV, and Molly is like really, really close to Bingo. And the people back at NASA go, Molly, we've run out of time. It's Bingo. You need to come up right now, or you're fucking gonna die.
Yep.
I love the moment that they sort of go back to NASA and they really focus on Margot for a second. And she goes, she's hot dogging it. She has nothing that she's hot dogging it. If she stays down there longer, she's going to not only cost her life, but she's going to cost Ed's life too. Yep. Look, I'm sorry, Margot. I said Molly, didn't I? Margot says, Molly's talking out of her ass. If we don't bring her up now, she's going to cost her life and Ed's life. We need to bring them up now. Margot didn't get a lot to do in this episode.
No,
She was there.
She was there at the first and at the end, and I don't even think she
Yeah.
said anything in the beginning.
Yeah. She, I don't, did she say something?
She was just in mission control as deep
Yeah.
letters. That's about it.
Yeah. No, but so as Molly is sort of not wanting to listen to Houston, she notices something. She notices something particular on this side of the canyon that she notices, like at the corner of her eye, and it's like this glowing starlight kind of thing. So she's like, what the fuck is that? She hops over there. She takes her little pickaxe and goes whack, whack. She breaks it. She breaks apart some of the deposit, and she goes, "What the hell is this?" She looks at it. She shows NASA back at Houston. They're like, "That is ice, and if there's ice, there's water."
Yep.
So everybody rejoices, and we understand now that it is possible to have a base on the moon because they don't have to bring their fucking water.
Yep.
They can make it on the goddamn moon.
Fuel. They can make fuel. They can make electricity. They can
rocket
make
fuel. They can do whatever they want. So fast forward to 2 weeks later, we see a habitat hovering over the moon, and it lands on the surface of the moon. And the last thing that we hear in this episode is an astronaut saying that Jamestown base has landed on the moon.
Yep.
And that's basically the end of this episode, give or take a couple really, really quick scenes with Karen and Wayne, where Wayne brings Karen a photo of her nightmare, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, he painted her.
I also think it's really funny when she takes it and she puts it in the corner away from everybody.
So I think she slides it behind the refrigerator almost, which is pretty
funny.
I'm not to dismiss it. She's like, we'll look at that later.
Yeah, I'll look at that later. It's so good.
No, the way the episode ends though with the first habitat module, I think really it tagged 3 years later, which means that we didn't actually get to see Danielle's mission because it went ahead. But what I love about it is like you see the use of the familiar technology. Like it has the limb stage, motor and the touchdown probes and all of that stuff, and it looks just like a more giant limb so it feels familiar as it's coming over. And of course, as always, the music of this episode is on point. But I was watching a documentary about actual American space history, and kind of like we forget how what we learned along the way led to what we were able to do in the early Project Mercury and Project Gemini missions. About Project Gemini is what we use to learn how to automatically guide a spacecraft, and because we learned how to automatically guide a spacecraft to land itself on Earth, we knew then how to tell it to automatically land itself on the moon. Right. And then the end of this episode just kind of shows the theoretical continuation of those same ideologies that, we learned how to do these things to get to the moon, and now we can stay on the moon. And I just love that the way that they, if you dig deep enough, there's enough parallel. If you're just watching the show to enjoy a good show, you don't have to have all that deep history for any of this to make sense and be fun. But being able to kind of see where even that divergences are still on track, it's just such a rewarding show to watch.
Yeah, but I really feel after this episode, that now we're cooking.
Oh, it's
now we're moving. So I think that'll do it for this review of For All Mankind Season 1, episode 5, entitled Into the Abyss. Before we go, Dan, would you like to tell people about our shirt that we have available?
We do have a shirt available. It is a representation of the NASA meatball logo with the initialism FAM for fam, for all mankind. It's called the Fam. And you can find it by visiting there it is, Linktree. If you go to my Linktree, there's a Cotton Bureau store there. You can find it. It's top of the page. And any and all proceeds from those sales are split equally amongst the two of us. Buy us a drink, help us put a little gas in the car, whatever it is we might do. And from there, also you can see everything else I'm doing. So it's all on the link tree.
Yeah, and also if you guys want an easier way to get to Dan's website so you can get to our shirt, I will post a link to Dan's cotton store in the description below so you can get exactly to our shirt.
Boom.
Yeah. So it'll be right down there for you to get to if that's something that you are interested in and supporting us.
High-quality
And if you
product.
do, yes, and if you do have money to support us, thank you. We appreciate it. But if you guys want to talk to me about my adventures online, the best place to find me is on X. I'm at CreekFanatic88. But Dan, if the folks want to chat with you, how could they find you?
I am a social butterfly. So you can find me on Twitter, X. You can find me on TikTok. You can find me on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, and Facebook, all of which are in the link tree you see on your screen.
All right. So until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching us. And as I say often, I'll see you when I see you.
So much happened here, and so much is about to.